Hey everyone, Vanessa here, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017. Today we're going to be going through the doctor's opinion. If you are following along on this series, I am going through the Big Book Awakening step guide, step work, and showing everyone how I was taken through the work in hopes that it will help other people as well. This is not to be used as a replacement for working with a sponsor. I do strongly recommend getting plugged into a good group of people at a local AA meeting, or even logging in online if you have to do it online, and finding a sponsor to take you through this work. One of the things that was always said in the rooms was don't let anybody read your big book for you. And what that means is we need to each be willing to have an experience with the step work, and that means doing the work. In Big Book Awakening, there are basically three parts to this. If I were sponsoring you, I would be meeting with you, reading with you, and then going through your questions and answers, and then you would be transcribing the book. The transcribing is the workbook, and it tells you exactly where, on what lines, on what page, and what to write. This is annotating the book and giving it better context, better reference, historical references or spiritual references, so that it gives you a better idea of what they were trying to say back in the 1930s, because believe it or not, language does not age well, and so this gives us the opportunity to have a modern day experience with this work. And yeah, so I'm going to be going through it by reading through it, giving you context through the transcriptions, and then going through the questions and answers at the end. Originally, I wanted to read my questions and answers from the first time I did the questionnaire. I can't find those. I will just give you my best answers, and then you guys can hear all of that. I encourage you that if you want to get really plugged in and start doing this work, you can go to bbaworks.com or bigbookawakening.com and get more information there. There's another website called We Do Recover. Those are all great resources. I know the people who run those sites, and nobody's doing this for money. I can assure you that. So let's go ahead and get started. We are reading the doctor's opinion. Step one is the physical craving of my body. We start by using the doctor's opinion as a tool by turning the statements into questions. And then we look at what happens to me after I started to drink or take the first drug. This has nothing to do with what you were thinking at the time. Look mainly at what happens after you ingested whatever substance it is that you are looking for help with, right? What we want to consider here is, do I lose control of my drinking or using after I take the first drink? Or can I control how I drink after I have started? Maybe I'm not an alcoholic. It's really important that we don't just take for granted that we're all alcoholics or addicts. Some people just have a really difficult time in their life and then they self-medicate. This work will still help that person, but they are not somebody who is dying of this disease, who drinks. And we'll go through the types of drinkers later on, but it's important that we know that if we are an alcoholic, that we be thoroughly convinced, because we're going to need to rely on that to get through the rest of the work. And they want you to really consider this. Don't take for granted and just check the box and be like, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, because you may not be. Every time we go through this work, I have gone through this work several times and taken other women through the work. I always still try to have the first step experience and really put myself back into the time and place, what my alcoholism was like, what my drinking was like, what those patterns were like, what my spiritual and mental and physical health were like at that time. Have this experience again and be grounded in that truth, because the further away you get from your last drink or drug, the bigger our delusions get. If we're not properly medicating that with the spiritual life and with reality in general, and by helping others and seeing this disease reflected back to us and other people, we can forget that we are alcoholics. And so it's important to me to stay grounded in that. And I don't find shame in it, because I understand that there are three parts to this. And many people suffer from the last two. The only thing that makes me different is this physical aspect of it, that like really only happens once the alcohol is in my system. Okay, so let's go ahead and start reading. If you are not the person who likes to be read to, this is not going to be the series for you. I will try to upload other videos, but I'm going to try to stay as true to the work, the way that I was led through it, and that means reading through the work. So let's go. I do recommend getting a copy of the big book. I have a big book because we write in them, but even if you just have the ones that they give away, I highly recommend getting a book just so you can at least read through it with me as I'm pointing out certain things. Okay, now let's jump in. The doctor's opinion. We of Alcoholics Anonymous believe the reader will be interested in the medical estimate of the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have experience with the sufferings of our members and have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. To whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. And I'm just going to emphasize this word recovered again really quickly. If you watched the last video and we went on the title page, Bill Wilson never uses the word, or the people who wrote this book together never used the word recovering. We are not going to go through all this work just to continue staying in a state of recovering. We are to be recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. This does not mean that we can drink again. This does not mean that we are cured. This just means that we are recovered from the hopelessness of the addiction. And by the way, I don't want a program that's only going to keep me in a status of recovering. I want to be recovered. I want to be free of this, right? And this is what the book and the step work promises us if we're willing to do the work. So I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group that may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. These men will have a remedy for thousands of situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say in this book. Very truly yours, William 𝒂𝒂𝒃𝒆, MD. The physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement. In this statement, he confirms that we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defectives. The things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. Any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Though we work out our solution on the spiritual as well as the altruistic plane, we favor hospitalization for the alcoholic who is very jittery or befogged. More often than not, it is imperative that a man's brain be cleared before he is approached, as he has a better chance of understanding and accepting what we have to offer. And so here they give us the definition of allergy. So it's a condition of unusual sensitivity to a substance, which in like amounts does not affect others and is characterized by systematic disorders. So think about that. If you know somebody who is allergic to strawberries, they're not a bad person because they're allergic to strawberries. It just, their body has a reaction to it, right? They have an abnormal reaction to it. And the body of an alcoholic has that same type of reaction. And in fact, there are certain ethnicities and certain genetic conditions that create a different type of metabolization of alcohol. There are just some other ways in which we are different, in which alcohol impacts us spiritually and mentally different as well. But we're going to talk about exactly how the allergy manifests in the alcoholic. And so the doctor writes, the subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is covered in such masterly detail. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. With what our ultra-modern standard, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Now, that is really important. What they're saying is moral psychology is an innuendo for a spiritual experience. We need to have something morally shift and change in us for our alcohol to be relieved from our alcoholism, right? He's saying this is of urgent importance to alcoholics to have this shift morally. So it's more of a scientific thing. Again, it's not like moral, religious type of thing. We think morals, we think of like condemnation to hell and stuff. And that's not what they're saying here. They're saying a type of disorder, right? A pathology behind why there is something that's so different in the alcoholic. They are also saying that even with our ultra modern standards, our scientific approach, we're just not well equipped to pull it off. The doctors are acknowledging their limitation and saying there is something that has to shift and change within the alcoholic for this to be effective. And even with all our sciencey stuff, we're not going to be able to pull that off. And to this day, you cannot cure alcoholism. The real deal alcoholic who has the allergy we'll discuss in a bit will not be cured from it. Even with more scientific technology, we're not able to do it. We still need to rely on this moral psychology, aka a spiritual experience. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital. While here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. Notice the action words in that, right? So it's not like he just had some cool ideas. No, he acted on these ideas. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases we have followed have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has labored long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of hell. Of course, here he's referencing Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson was a patient of his, and when he had this spiritual experience, he was able to work around it and share his experience with other alcoholics who were also being helped by his experience. And this was helping to keep him sober. This book was written coming out of Prohibition, right? And so you have to think about the people who were becoming addicted to alcohol that was literally being made in a bathtub. Bathtub gin was a real thing. And so these men and women were primarily drinking just like moonshine and like stuff that we couldn't sell today legally. I equate this a lot with what we're seeing happen with cannabis products. The weed that people are in the cannabis products that people have now, entirely different than what I would recognize from 10 years ago, right? 15 years ago when I was a youth. Thinking about how people, and that stuff definitely causes psychosis. There are definitely dealers who put fentanyl in it, and these are not myths. I've seen it and experienced it with other people or people in recovery before. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be maximum benefit. And so they're saying here, you're going to need to dry out a little bit before we think about even like you're going to have some separation, some physical abstinence from the substance in order to have a chance here and some stabilization. And of course, alcohol is actually one of the few drugs that you can die from while withdrawing because it does impact so many parts of your body. So we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they could not break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. So they're saying here, the allergy, I think that it's Charlie Sheen or whatever, he has that quote, oh, I can't drink alcohol, I break out in handcuffs, and everyone's, ooh, that's such a clever little saying. And it's okay, but for the real alcoholic, and I'm not saying he's not, I'm just saying that's a very misleading statement to qualify yourself as an alcoholic, because there are plenty of people who are alcoholics who never end up in handcuffs, who never end up in jail, who never end up in a mental hospital, who never suffer very dire and dramatic consequences like that. But there's internally dying a spiritual death every single day that they're drinking. And what they are saying here is that the allergy manifests itself in the form of a craving. So once we have introduced alcohol into our body or drugs or whatever, even if you want to do sex and love, if you want to do food or sugar, if you want to do gambling, these types of behaviors, that adrenaline, even with codependency, that's still an adrenaline type of high from controlling and fixing. Anytime that gets introduced into our body, we break out into a craving for more of it. And we lose control of that craving. So If you think 3 times out of 10, I can control my drinking, it's okay. But most of the time you can't, and therefore you have lost and you can't determine or predict when those times will be that you've controlled it, right? Because out of the 10 times, you've likely anticipated that you were going to control it, and then you end up not being able to, except for those 3 times. So we'll continue reading and learning more about this. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. What does that mean? Like, oh, please, if you love me, you would stop, or I can't believe you would do that, or I love you so much, you're hurting so many people. All of that emotional language does not impact the alcoholic. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. And these are very important words. Our recovery cannot be grounded on anything human. It's not going to be on your sponsor. It's not going to be on your meetings. It's not going to be on this book. It has to be grounded in your higher power, in God. And the 12 steps, the meetings, the other people, these are all ways to get connected to your higher power, but your relationship is your responsibility, creator, okay? And maintaining it and growing it. They are telling us here that, yeah, even like the consequences of our actions, that's all going to be forgotten pretty quickly when we're having a rough day or we're bored and there's some booze in front of us. This is telling us there needs to be something of depth and weight that we can ground our recovery into in order to be recovered and stay sober. If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line. See the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children, let solving these problems become a part of their daily work, even with their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement. Oh, and the most cynical will not wonder that we have accepted and encouraged this movement of. So we feel after many years of experience that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. You guys, that's why we drink. If you're like, why do I keep doing this? It keeps hurting me. It's ruining all my relationships. I lost all my jobs. I keep getting arrested. I keep losing my shoes. I would always lose my shoe as an alcoholic for some reason. They're telling us that we drink because we like the effect that it causes. And what's that effect? The sensation is so elusive that while we admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can experience a sense of ease and comfort. So that is why we drink and use. That sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks, which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as many do, and the phenomenon of craving kicks in, so that allergy, right? Then they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. And this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope for his recovery. Not sure if y'all have experience with that, but if you've ever been like, I'm not doing that again, and then you lose that control once you have that first beer, now you're 10 beers deep, and it's like such a different experience because again, it's not like you went in anticipating that you were going to lose control of your drinking that day or that night. I was clearly a day drinker. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. So again, if you know anybody who has ever recovered from alcoholism, they can feel different. I've met people in their alcoholism and then they come back sober and their energy is very different and I can feel them and I can sense them and I'm like, oh, they have shifted. This is also why sometimes when alcoholics and addicts say that they're sober, they can be acting totally normal. Maybe they are sober, like abstinent from the drug or alcohol, but they haven't had this internal change. They can still feel like they're under the influence of something because they're still running off other compulsive behaviors or beliefs, often just the underlying basis there being fear. So there's a lot of anxiety still, and they're acting out in selfish ways. I say all of this with a lot of love and compassion. As addicts and alcoholics, we are looking at a life of managing ourselves in a way to avoid that, because that ultimately can tip us back into drinking and using. Anyway, I'm getting really ahead of ourselves here, and I don't want to confuse us, so I'll keep that for later. So he's saying that anyone can recover as long as we're willing to follow a few simple rules, which is really funny because if you know any alcoholics, we're not super great at following all the rules all the time. Men have cried out to me in sincere, despairing appeal, "Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me." Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it is often not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. So he's saying, yeah, maybe some therapy will work for some people, but there's something that needs to go a little bit deeper than what the standard psychological approach does. This is also, by the way, talk therapy didn't work for me. I was in therapy for several years and I was on medications. And especially while I was still drinking, it didn't do anything for me because I was under the influence of alcohol. And so I still wasn't able to be honest with myself, let alone a psychiatrist. Therapy alone just did not do it for me. I would never discourage anybody from going to therapy. Definitely go. I stayed in psychiatry and therapy for another 2 years when I first got sober. I eventually got off all my medications. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I've had many men who worked months on some other problem or business deal, which was settled on a certain date favorable to them. Then they took a drink, and the phenomenon of craving, which is the allergy, at once became paramount. Important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. A lot of addicts and alcoholics can have an overwhelming sense of intelligence and willpower in other parts of their lives and can often be really successful. But wherever alcohol is involved, as soon as that enters our body, that becomes the most important thing, and everything else falls by the wayside. The family is gone, the job is gone, the morals are gone, the money is gone, the health, everything else falls by the wayside once we get into this one-track mind of drinking and drugs. He's saying this isn't just an intelligence or a mind issue. This is a physical thing that happens once you're introducing the substance into your body. You're not drinking to feel something, you're drinking to overcome this craving, this allergy of craving that has kicked in once the booze is in your system, which honestly really does, because it does explain a lot of my drinking to me. So again, these men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. That's terrifying. If you've been there, you know exactly what that means. You know exactly what that feels like. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. And that can be to drink or to kill themselves, right? Or to kill themselves by drinking. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over-remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink, and he plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. And there is a type who believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There is the manic depressive type who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there are types entirely normal in every respect except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, and friendly people. All these, and many others, have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. The allergic response is the craving for more alcohol. That is what happens once we introduce it. The allergic reaction that we have is craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. So if any of this is resonating for you and you're still messing around with moderation, I hope you can keep an open mind about the rest of the step work and see if moderation is really going to be a solution for you, or if it's just something you're holding on to out of a hope or a delusion that you'll be able to drink differently next time. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debates. Much has been written, pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. You are doomed if you are a chronic alcoholic. And if you have this allergy, because what's going to happen is you're going to lose the amount and how often you drink once you introduce alcohol into your body. So that's why they're saying that abstinence is really the only way to assure yourself some type of recovery. But that's just to get started. The whole rest of the 12 steps is to stay sober. So what is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. 1 year prior to this experience, a man was treated for chronic alcoholism. He had partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. Imagine that. Like somebody sees you, you're familiar, but you feel so changed to this person from who you used to be as an alcoholic and addict that they're like, is this a whole new person? I only vaguely remember them, and their vibe is extremely different. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called the moral psychology, the spiritual experience, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. And to think about that, because he's trying to hold these external people responsible for his sobriety. They understood, well, the only thing that's really going to help this guy is if he has a deep spiritual experience that stems from his internal world, right? However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book, and he has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I always thought that was kind of like a weird sentence. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William 𝒂𝒂𝒃𝒆, MD. So I do love that. And I love that because it really resonates for me. When I first came into the rooms, I was definitely scoffing. I didn't believe in what they were saying. I thought Bill Wilson was a rich white dude who didn't know what real problems were. I'm going to go through and read these questions now, and I think I'll go ahead and do a screen share. Okay, never mind. I can't do that because Zoom won't let me, but I will fix it for next time. So we're on page 4, the doctor's opinion. The question is, why am I interested in the plan of recovery described in this book? Question 2 is, do I believe convincing testimony must surely come from a doctor who had experience with the suffering of alcoholics and have witnessed the return to health? Would this be helpful to me? Am I the type regarded as hopeless, wants to quit but can't? Am I the type with whom every method I had tried completely failed? What have I tried? Am I willing to believe this book has a remedy for me? Am I willing to rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves in this book? And then we talk about the allergy definition again. So it's a condition of unusual sensitivity to a substance, which in amounts does not affect others and is characterized by systematic disorders. I'm sorry, I need to change get rid of my contacts because my eyes are dry. Okay, the glare is so real, but okay, here we go. Allergy is a condition of unusual sensitivity to a substance which in like amounts does not affect others and is characterized by systematic disorders. So note, it's like having an allergic reaction to strawberries. I can't eat them without breaking out in a physical itch, nothing to do with what I'm thinking. You're not thinking, like, the thought doesn't create reaction, right? It is the consumption of the strawberries which creates the physical reaction. So as with alcohol, when I drink, I break out in an itch to have another drink, then another and another. You'll see your experience with the physical powerlessness, not in the amount you drink, but in your lack of control. And it's really important that we realize we are only talking about powerlessness in context of our physical body once an actual drug or alcohol is introduced to it. People hear the word powerlessness and our ego immediately gets defensive, and it's I'm not powerless. I have so much control. So many other things in my life are going correct. I can manage this. I can manage businesses. I can manage my family. I have money. I do this. And some of us are just like gutter drunks and we don't manage any of that. But we're still under the delusion that we have better willpower. The powerlessness is coming from this physical aspect. Is coming from the sense that we lose control once we introduce this substance, this actual drug into our body. Do I believe that my body is quite as abnormal as my mind after the first drink or drug? Why? Did any explanation I've heard ever satisfy me as to why I cannot control my drinking and using? What did I hear? What have I told myself? Do I believe these things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with me? Do I believe any picture of me which leaves out this physical factor feels incomplete? Explain what the physical factor looks like when you drink or use. Does the doctor's theory that I have an allergy to alcohol interest me? Does the explanation about the allergy make good sense? Does the allergy explain why you lost control and couldn't stop? Do I believe I need to find a power which can help pull me back from the gates of death, and that must be a power greater than my own? Explain why. Do I believe that the reaction of alcohol on me is like an allergy and that there is a craving for more that occurs after the first drink or drug? Can I safely use alcohol and or drugs in any form at all? Did I form the habit? Could I break it? Did I lose my self-confidence that anything human could keep me sober? Do I believe a frothy emotional appeal, like someone begging me to stop, never worked, so the message that I better get here in this program to interest and hold me must have depth and weight more than emotional or intellectual appeal? Did I drink because I liked the effect of alcohol? What was the effect like for me? Was the effect so great that after a time, even though you knew it was bad for you could not tell the true from the false, like investing in cocaine to sell it or going to a bar for a couple of beers? Did my alcoholic life seem the only normal one? How? And by the way, this is a sad one because I remember being an alcoholic and being super drunk and having drunk the whole night or drunk for 2 weeks and being like, oh yeah, just waking up at 6 a.m. to go to the liquor store is totally normal. It's really weird that there's people out here running at 6 a.m. for their health. What kind of weird, that seemed abnormal to me. Whereas waking up every morning and vomiting because I was so hungover seemed incredibly normal to me. We will adjust our life very quickly to suit our alcoholism, which can be very devastating. Am I restless, irritable, easily annoyed, and discontent, never satisfied until I experience a sense of ease and comfort when I pick up a drink or drug? When I start to drink, to change the way I feel, am I able to stop once I feel the way I want to feel? That's a delusion because we think we know how we want to feel, but we always drink more and surpass it. Do I believe that in recovery, I must experience the sense of ease and comfort that I got by drinking and using? Do I pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with the firm resolution to never drink or use again? What happens when I make resolutions to not drink or use? Is this repeated over and over? Do I have other solutions? Can I stay stopped on my own? Do I need help? Do I believe that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change, and that is my only answer? When I start drinking, can I mentally control when I am going to stop drinking? Has this craving at any time become more important than all other interests, job, family, etc.? Was I always going on the wagon, swearing off for keeps? Was I over remorseful, making many resolutions to quit? Was I unwilling to admit that I cannot take a drink or drug? Why? Did I plan various ways of drinking in an effort to control my drinking? Give an example. Do I believe that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time that I could take a drink without danger? Why? Have I identified my allergy to alcohol as a craving for more once I start to drink? Can I start drinking or using without developing the craving? What happens when I do? Do I believe this allergy differentiates me and sets me apart from other people? I'm not like other people when it comes to alcohol and drugs. Do I believe the only relief to this physical allergy is entire abstinence? Can I do that on my own, just not drink or use? Do I feel doomed when it comes to alcohol and or drugs? Was I living to drink or use? What did my day look like? And then something just to sit with and sit and consider. There's no yes, no immediate answer or response that's required for this. But a consideration is that if you have a sobriety date that is more than 10 days and you can't produce the sense of ease and comfort powerful enough to keep you from taking the first drink, how is it that you continue to have the sobriety date no matter how you feel? Meditate on that. So that is all that I've got for you guys today. I hope that was helpful. Please leave me some comments, like, share, subscribe, and always open to feedback as well. I'm definitely going to be working on some screen sharing and kind of sharing what I'm reading so that you guys can read along with me if you don't have a book. I know how tedious it can be to listen to somebody else read if you're not following along. So anyway, I thank you so much for being here and I love you. Bye.